Welcome back, and to be shedding more light on those important visits conducted by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, I'm honored to be having with me over the phone Dr. Fouad Razek, the Professor of International Relations and Foreign Policy. Dr. Fouad, thank you very much for being with us today on the Breakfast Show, and the good morning.
Good morning to you, and thanks for having me.
Anytime. First of all, how did you see the visits by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to both Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and the keenness of the political leadership of Egypt to be de-escalating the situation and sending support and solidarity messages to the Gulf states?
Actually, such visits are very vital and important, not only in its timing, but in its wider meaning to show Egypt's solidarity with the Gulf Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Bahrain. All these visits will, of course, lead to some sort of a meaningful situation expressed by Egypt's citizens. As a matter of fact, the course of diplomacy is very hard and very difficult in the circumstance, and Egypt is trying to drive a middle course amongst all this. And it seems that Egypt, of course, with pride and without any prejudice, is doing a vital role in the middle of a very rough course, actually, in the area. In the sense that it can do something on the way of diplomacy, in the way of de-escalating the tension in the area, and in the meantime trying to keep a very narrow window actually of diplomacy, so as to put an end to this kind of escalation. And of course, this needs some concerted efforts by Egypt and other main powers in the area, and to assure the Gulf states that Egypt is standing by their side all the time. And such visits actually clear the way for the role Egypt is playing, and play a role actually in dissipating the rumors and the other elements of tension between such countries. And these visits, of course, help a lot in doing so.
Yes, Dr. Fouad, we have seen in the past couple of days other visits conducted by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the GCC countries, as you mentioned, like to the United Arab Emirates and Qatar yesterday, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And speaking specifically about Saudi Arabia, how do you see the crucial visit to the Gulf Cooperation Council country and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi being received by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman upon his arrival there?
Of course, Egypt looks at these countries as vital, especially Saudi Arabia, because what we have seen recently is that people trying to drive a wedge between Egypt and these countries, and with all the wisdom of Egypt and the visits, actually, and physical visits to the area is very important, away from the statements, official statements of this. This has helped a lot, actually, in this, and the main thing is to reassure the Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia, that Egypt is standing by their side under any circumstances, and at the same time Egypt loudly condemning any Iranian attacks on these Gulf states, and consider this part of its own security as well. So Egypt as well is another party that could be harmed by such attacks from Iran on especially the power plants in these countries. If there is a window a window of diplomacy, I mean, to play, Egypt is the best position actually to do this, especially if it gathered some sort of cooperation with countries like Oman. We are even talking to other parties like Russia, like China, and that sort of thing. So that could help a lot in that sense. So Egypt wants to be seen as, a sort of balancing power in the area, though, as I said in the beginning, it's very difficult as it comes amid, a very heated tension, and nobody speaks loudly about negotiations, although some voices express their wish to go to negotiation table, because Egypt, I think, considers that at the end of any war, it would go to the negotiation table, whatever happens, because this is the only solution will be left after, the war settles and, all the parties come back to their senses, especially the Iranian mentality, which sees differently from all other people in the area, including Egypt. As attacking the Gulf states was a sort of a mistake, a big strategic mistake on the part of Iran. So Iran wants to interpret this as something in defense of its own interests, but this idea, this logic is refused by all, including Egypt. Egypt refused this kind of logic by Iran because it is very dangerous. This is a very sensitive area, actually. So Egypt is finding itself in a position to try to mediate in that sense. In the meantime, keeping abreast of all events and keeping its position as a full support to and this is very important, actually, full support of the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, because this is the role should have been played by Egypt. In the meantime, as I said, Egypt's trying to find a straight, and fine line, actually, between diplomacy and war, if there is a window and any opportunity to negotiate such a thing. Difficult, it's not easy, but this is a vital role played by Egypt at the same time.
Yes, Dr. Fouad, you've mentioned the key word here, which is Egypt mediating. As we did see in the past year, Egypt, as well as the United States, successfully reached a ceasefire to be ending the aggression of the Israeli occupation forces against the innocent Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip. How do you see the role of Egypt in mediating a stop or a halt to the war between the United States and Israel and Iran on the other side, especially that in the past few hours we have seen a possibility of negotiations between the United States and Iran, but on very hard terms, and of course there is a role, an important role for Egypt played within this mediation.
Actually, it's more of the same, as the vital role played by Egypt and calling for the Sharm el-Sheikh and, inviting President Trump to the area. That was very helpful, and all the countries all over the world appreciated this Egyptian stand by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And this more of the same, but it's more difficult now than before, because the situation is such inflammatory. So it won't be that easy, but this is a vital role Egypt will play under any circumstances. It should, we don't know what happened, what kind of talks behind the scenes between Egypt and countries even like the United States of America, because it has its own channel as well, and the other channel which is as important as well to channel with Iran as well to compensate of doing this. People as well should understand that when Egypt even talks to Iran or trying to let Iran know that what's doing is wrong and Egypt supporting this country, there is a message of peace as well. So Egypt is a voice to be reckoned with. It's not an easy thing, but Egypt's a vital role, and it's not destined to do this all the time and be seen as a leading power with negotiations. And as I said, there's maybe some kind of negotiations in there behind the scenes that we don't know the details of them. But here the situation is really very difficult, and all efforts should be concerted. It is not shouldn't be seen as well as a unilateral effort by Egypt, but it should be not bilateral, but it's also all parties should join hands in that sense. But the message should be, and it is actually very clear on the part of Egypt, that it is standing for own interests as well, standing by the Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others, in that very difficult situation. And Iran should know that Egypt would never give in to the Iranian mentality at the expense of the interests of its own and the interests of the Gulf states.
Yes, and speaking about the voice of Egypt and the Egyptians, how do you see the importance of conveying a message on the popular level and on the political level and the political leadership levels, as well as we did see the visits paid by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, yesterday Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, to be stating that the security and the stability of the GCC countries is a part and parcel of the Egyptian national security.
As I said before, such visits are very vital, and Egypt is being seen as playing a leading role in that sense, and trying to make sense of any situation that would lead to de-escalating the tension. This area is very important to Egypt as well, and in this case, Egypt, voice is heard all over the world as well, and maybe everybody is seeking the Egyptian voice to be loud again and do something along the lines like what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh regarding Gaza. And the only thing that's remaining now intact is the Gaza ceasefire, regardless of any violations of this ceasefire. But it is still standing, and it's working. And this is very much appreciated as well by the United States. And this could play something in these lines. The talking between Egyptian president and maybe other presidents and world leaders could lead to something like this. But the main message is that Egypt is supporting the Gulf states all along and not supporting the Iranian side, trying to make Iran as well understand the same thing, that the interests of Egypt as well lies within the interests of the Gulf states.
Yes, we have seen over the past week visits conducted by both President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati, and phone calls around the clock with the counterparts from Iran, the United States, speaking about the Foreign Minister of Egypt and the Secretary of State for the United States, Mark Rubio. The contacts taking place between Egyptian officials and their counterparts from the GCC countries, Iran, the United States, and other regional players. How do you see this balance being maintained by Egypt throughout those tough circumstances and the recent developments in the Middle East?
It's a matter of the balancing act you're talking about, rightly so, because the balancing act is very difficult at the moment, and all these efforts are very much appreciated by all. And it should bear its fruits. Maybe we can see the fruits straight away, but you have to wait till the situation is clearer. But what matters here, and after all these visits by the Foreign Secretary of Egypt, and trying to explain to other parties the role played by Egypt in that sense, and it's a welcome role actually, by even the Gulf states welcoming this stance, and such visits are very vital and important. They are not show-up visits, they are real visits that could lead to something, and could let Iran know that Egypt is playing that role in the sense that defending its interests and the interests of the Gulf states, and it is not in the Iranian interest to go on like this and trying to impose its mentality on the area, because this is a sort of a struggle to understand the Iranian mentality in that sense, And now we see even warning from President Trump to Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz,
Yes.
because it's a killing bit. Actually, Strait of Hormuz and it could be striking the energy plants in Iran if it didn't open the strait after 48 hours.
Yes.
So it is a very volatile situation actually, and usually the voice of peace is not heard a lot, but it should be maintained all the time. And even we heard something about negotiations, although the situation is very difficult, but there are some parties, even in the Gulf states, talk about negotiations and trying to end this peacefully, because as I said from the beginning, any war will end in the negotiation table.
Yes, years ago we have seen the proposal or suggestion by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be forming an Arab joint regional force to be protecting not just the GCC countries but the Arab world in general. Do you think that the war going on right now in the Middle East, as well as the 12-day war that took place in the month of June, could be changing the mindset of the leaderships of several Arab countries to be actually implementing such a force?
Forming a joint Arab force, this was a very old call by Egypt, actually, and it was not activated in the same lines and in the sense that it could be effective. But maybe at that time, when it called for it, it was not that important. But now it's become essential and it's become vital to form such forces, because Egypt will not be seen as the only power is doing this. It should be consistent efforts. And actually, the Gulf states now developed a lot in that sense. And now, when it accepts such attacks from Iran, it shows that some strength in its own right, and when by joining forces with Egypt, and this could help a lot actually in sending yet another message to Iran that there is a voice to be reckoned with, and such things could work. Now the situation is very suitable now for such forces, but at the time of such heated condition and war, it needs the work should be accelerated and formed as quickly as possible to even to do this when actually coming to the negotiating table. It should be something, a very winning card in the negotiations on the part of the Gulf states, on the part of Egypt, and on the part even of the United States and Iran.
Yes, Dr. Fouad Razek, the Professor of International Relations and Foreign Policy, thank you very much for being with us today on The Breakfast Show. We'll be having a quick break. Stay tuned.
International law and international humanitarian law must always be respected.